I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. First Friday's free coaching, a confidential group to bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement. Welcome to Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast. I'm Megan Skidmore, your host, and I have Marley Orton with me here today. Marley is a new friend of mine. We met a little over a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago.
Yeah.
And I felt connected with you, Marley, and your spirit and your story and just who you are. And I'm so grateful you accepted this invitation to come and be on this podcast and be interviewed. So thank you.
Well, thank you for asking me. As you know, it took me quite a while to feel like I was ready, but I appreciate that open invitation.
Absolutely. I have felt a pull, Pull, a call to do this, to share stories, specifically faith stories. And I don't take it for granted, and I don't take it lightly, because people, you are sharing your heart. You're sharing your story, something that is so meaningful to you and that you feel deeply. And a lot of times it's a story that connects us to those who have come before us, whether or not they were born into the same faith that we were or practice currently. So I honor that. And I thank you for being brave, for coming on and sharing. I know that there will be those who are listening who will be touched by your story and it will resonate with them. So, as you know, I talk to people about their faith journeys. I started this podcast in an attempt to normalize having questions, having doubts, realizing your journey is looking quite different than maybe what you had anticipated it would be. And on top of that, it's very different than those around you, your loved ones, those in your faith community, etc., etc. And it can become kind of a solitary place. And so by you adding your story to those that have shared and has been recorded before you, my hope is that you can feel a part of something bigger, connected in our faith communities, in all of our communities that help to create more conversations around these topics and help to give others that.
It's so important because you're right. It does feel very isolating. And when you find individuals or even groups that are having similar, not the same, of course, we're all unique, but having similar journey, it really helps to feel that connection and helps, like you said, to normalize this faith journey.
Exactly. And I hope that those listening will take heart and know that their journey is valid and that what they're feeling and have been feeling and going through, all of it is okay. It's valid. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just part of your journey. And so we get you. So,
Thank you.
Marley, can you take a minute and share a little bit about you with our listeners? Your background, where you're from, your family, of course, your faith of origin, your education, all the things that just make up Marley.
Okay. Well, I am one of 7 children. I was born in Mississippi. That's where my dad was from. My mom was from California. And of course, they met at BYU, like so many. Anyway, so my dad was transferred about every other year early in my life. So I lived in different states until we got to Utah. And we moved to Utah when I was in second grade and stayed until my senior year. And then my parents moved back to the South to Alabama, and I stayed here. So for most of my life, other than a few stints in Alabama and my mission, I've lived in Utah. Yes, I grew up in an Orthodox LDS family.
Mm-hmm.
3 of my 4 grandparents were converts.
Okay.
So I only had one grandparent that's, pioneer stock. And they had, especially my dad's parents, they were converted. They would join the church when my dad was just a toddler. And they had a really amazing story and went through some hardships, like they had to break ice on the pond. They got or they got baptized in January. And so they were baptized in a pond. And my grandmother's parents disowned her for many years. And so those stories really affected me. And I felt quite a loyalty to the church because of all the sacrifice that my
Right.
grandparents had made for their faith.
So your grandmother was disowned
Yes.
by her parents for a time, or?
Yeah, eventually they came. I mean, how long can grandparents resist grandchildren, right? And so eventually they came around so that they could have contact with their grandchildren.
Yeah, that's
But they lived very close to each other, which we're from backwoods Mississippi. And so neighbors are, miles apart. And so they all lived in the same little community. So I imagine it must have been quite difficult to be estranged from your parents and live in the same community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that it didn't last the duration of their lifetime. Those our relationships are affected by our faith journeys completely and totally. And I have no idea what the climate, the temperature was as far as social discussions or discourse about religious topics at the time. But clearly, having different viewpoints, experiencing things in a different way when it comes to a person's faith practice affected your grandmother's relationship. And I know that that's obviously not an isolated case. It happens in lots of families.
Yes. So, like I said, that did have an impact on me. Their story did. And I feel like, I had a happy childhood. We did all the things, right? We did family home evening. We went to church every Sunday. We did scripture study, hit and miss. But I feel like I had a happy childhood and I was very believing. For a short time after I graduated from high school, I spent a couple of years not attending church and just kind of, sowing my wild oats, as they say, before feeling like a pull to come back. And then within a year of that, I really felt like God wanted me to serve a mission. And so I did that. I moved back with my parents in Alabama. My dad was bishop at the time. And so he wanted to kind of help me get through that process. And I served in the Santo Domingo Dominican Republic mission.
Awesome. I'm a little
And
jealous.
yes, I learned to love it. It was really tough at first. I'm sure everyone can relate who served a mission that, the first several months are pretty difficult, especially in a new culture. But I did learn to love it and made some amazing connections and friends that are still precious to me to this day. I'm in communication with, some of those people.
That's fantastic. So you speak Spanish?
I
That's
do.
awesome. So that's a great starting point. Kind of gives us an idea of your background. So you said 3 of the 4 grandparents that you had converted. And just for those that are listening from different faith backgrounds, when Marley mentioned that one of her grandparents was, quote, pioneer stock. I know what you mean. Some who are listening may or may not know what that means. Can you just take a minute, take a couple sentences and share what you mean by that?
Yeah. So his family, his ancestors joined the church in South Africa, were baptized into the LDS
Wow.
church in South Africa. And then they
Wow.
immigrated like many others. And then they ended up settling in Idaho. And that's where my grandpa was born before their family had moved to California. He had a sister who had
Okay.
leukemia, and they thought that the lower elevation would be more helpful to her health. So they moved to
I
California. So
gotcha.
that's how he ended up in California.
Gotcha. Okay. Love it. So you mentioned something when we very first started chatting, and I'm hopeful to go a little bit deeper. You said something to the effect that the sacrifices of your grandparents and their grandparents and so on, those who came before you felt a certain responsibility towards that. And you didn't say it in this exact way, but it affected maybe your choices or the direction that your faith journey has taken, maybe currently is taking. Can you share a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Yeah. So at the time, of course, I wasn't conscious of it. But, through these past, several years, I've recognized how that impacted me. Like, that I wanted to honor, like, I love my grandparents and their sacrifice, just those actions showed me how precious
Mm-hmm.
this religion was to them. And so I didn't want to take that for granted. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
honor that and honor them as well. And so I think just and I'm sure most people are like this, that their faith of origin, that's just what you expect, that this is my faith of
Yeah.
origin. I truly believed that it was that it's the only true church, as it says in our book of scriptures, the Doctrine and Covenants. I was all in Orthodox believing. And yes, my grandparents' sacrifice and journey
Mm-hmm.
did influence that. But I felt
Yeah.
like it was a positive, good influence.
Yeah, I appreciate you expanding on that some. I totally get that. I have ancestors that go quite a ways back, and they also made sacrifices to join the church. And I've tried to reframe it, over the years. What if instead of, it's instead of seen as we're breaking tradition or something, that we're expanding and building upon it, upon
Yeah,
all of those rich things that you mentioned that your grandparents cultivated and found and passed on to your parents and then they to you and you to your kids.
yeah, absolutely. Just similar. That's very similar to the understanding I've come to through this faith journey.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. This probably means rewinding some, but I really love to hear about those moments when a person really feels this pivot, a shift, you might call it. Use whatever term that resonates for you. Meaning, and what I mean by that is these points in our journey where we're forced to look at some uncomfortable information or deal with some uncomfortable thoughts that come up or feelings even as we begin to realize that something that we understood in a certain way isn't necessarily that way any longer. Like you start to peel back some layers, your eyes start to open, and you start to, with increased information and additional understanding, right? Then, of course, that's going to affect your viewpoint and affect your thoughts and your feelings about whatever it might be. For me, it was when my kiddo came out as in the LGBTQ plus community. And so I'd love if you can share with us those embryonic stirrings, those points where you really started to, you had to wrestle. The wrestle was like it just really wasn't an option anymore. You couldn't just walk away from the wrestle.
Yeah, so I did have that well, I've kind of had that experience multiple times
Okay.
that took me to different levels. So I feel like just trying to think if this is right. The first time, like really, that I had, like I felt like my floor had been, or the rug had been
Hmm.
pulled out from under me, right?
Right. Your foundation
Um,
crumbled.
yeah, was probably my children were little, and I haven't shared this with very many people, but I had this very sacred experience and felt that I was given a message that my mission was short in this life and that I needed to prepare and do the things that I needed to do to prepare for that. And that was really shocking to me. You know, my kids were little, and
Understandably so. Wow.
yeah, and I sought further revelation and felt like I had about 2 years. And for about 6 months after that, I felt like Jesus was walking right beside me, that I could ask him a question in my head and the answer came back immediately. It was just a very sacred time. Yeah, it felt really special.
That's really
And
cool.
yeah, and
Thank you for
I came
sharing
to
that.
accept that that was going to happen and that God would help me
Hmm.
prepare both myself and my family for that eventuality. Well, 2 years came and went, and I was still here. And that was a faith crisis to me because the power with which I had that experience was so powerful, and multiple experiences within that that I didn't understand. And it felt like, well, if I can't trust those experiences, then how
Hmm.
can I trust any other spiritual experience I've had that has brought me to the faith that I have now, right? And I wrestled with that for a while. And I didn't get any concrete answers. The only thing
Hmm.
that I was able to settle upon was just that there was some reason why I needed that experience.
Hmm.
And then it was probably within the next year after that, you know, not happening, that our oldest son was diagnosed with an incurable type of sarcoma. And so we went through years of chemo, treatments, surgeries, you know, just a lot. And of course, financial effects as well. And during that time, you know, I really,
Hmm.
I'm not I guess I need to preface this. I'm really not a surface level player. I'm a very deep thinker. I'm a contemplative, and
You're talking my language. Totally.
I delve deeply into subjects and I'm constantly learning. And so during that time, I started learning more about using faith as a principle of power. You know, I started doing things with that in mind and thinking if I have enough faith, then my son can be healed. And that didn't happen. It wasn't like that was the one trial at that time, you know, it was multitude. In fact, my best friend called me Job because it just seemed
Oh
like there was
gosh.
so much, just a lot of things, heavy things. And I truly did have my, you know, one of my Garden of Gethsemane moment. And that was a faith crisis as well during that time. Like, I feel like I am using faith. I feel like I am doing my part. So why isn't it, you know, what we want, what we desire, which is a righteous desire? Why isn't that coming to fruition? Why is my son
Hmm.
having to suffer like he's suffering? You know, and as a mother, you just want to trade places with them, you
Yeah.
know? And so there was one night that I drove into the foothills by where we lived and parked and just screamed and yelled and was angry and basically threw a temper tantrum, you know, and sobbed. And that experience was really pivotal for me because all I felt heard, and all that I felt, I just got this warm sensation starting at my head and just going through my body of just love, love and acceptance and understanding. And just that feeling, you know, that my heavenly parents, you know, if they were there, they would be, you know, even more so like me as a parent, like just wanting to put their arms
Hmm.
around me, envelop me in their love. And that made such a difference that, you know, then I just was like, you know, I don't know why. I don't know why, but I do trust. I do trust my heavenly parents.
Hmm.
So those were the two probably most profound
Yeah.
experiences of faith crisis and I wouldn't say necessarily resolution, but comfort and maybe a little understanding.
Hmm.
And then fast forward, and my middle child came out at 16,
Okay.
came out as pansexual, and then it was gay, lesbian, and eventually, when they were 24 years old, were able to find the the word, the identity that
Uh-huh.
resonated with them. Like it was a journey for them,
Yeah.
and they are non-binary.
Okay.
So that started me and my children on kind of there was a faith crisis because
Yeah.
all the answers I was given in prayer through that time, and I should say for 2 years before they came out, I was being prepared. Like God had whispered to me
Hmm.
that this was going to happen. So I feel like it was such a blessing because I was able to respond in love and acceptance and compassion.
So if you don't mind, can you give us kind of a time frame of when this was? Was this like your oldest son who had incurable sarcoma, right? That was quite a ways ago, like long ago when you were in your early parts of your
Yeah.
marriage. So fast forward like the 20 teens when
So let
your
me think about
middle
this.
child,
Yeah. So middle child, that would have been
you don't have to say an exact year. You can just say the
that would have
decade.
probably been around 2013
Okay, so the
when they
beginning.
first came out. Yeah. And my oldest was diagnosed in 2016. So anyway,
Okay.
we weren't dealing full all in with that, with the cancer at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2013. And then it wasn't until I would say, yeah, 8 years later. So that would be 2021 that they finally
Hmm.
found the verbiage, to identify how they really felt,
Yeah.
and feel.
I've learned that it is a process.
Yeah.
It's a part of our identity, our human identity that I think traditionally hasn't been encouraged or the option wasn't even available to think about how a person experiences gender and sexuality in their life. Traditionally, sex has been such a taboo topic, you know. You had a lot going on this past couple decades, and it was during a time when people still weren't, I think they were just starting, at least in the circles, the faith circles, the LDS circles of which, you know, I have been a part and whatnot. They really weren't talking a lot about, at least in a maybe a positive way, you know, in 2013 was when you're
Yeah.
talking about.
I didn't know
And
anybody really.
yeah, share if you don't mind, what was that like? What was going on for you through all of this?
Um, well, it was really difficult in the church because people couldn't relate. Like I don't during that time, I don't know that I knew anyone
Hmm.
that had a child in that identified in the LGBTQ community. I'm just going to say queer community.
Yeah, queer is an umbrella term that has been reclaimed by the LGBTQIA plus individuals, and it's seen as a positive term. So yeah, I do use
Yes.
that too.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So my child, their name is Cece, Cecilia when they were born, but Cece went to church still, but had a really, really hard time. And I
Hmm.
remember one state conference we went and the state president talked about, like his whole talk was about same-sex marriage. And of course, that was the time when people were talking about it because there was different bills in different states
Right.
going around. But we got home and Cece just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and said, I know God hates me. And I said, no, God does not hate you. And she said, then why does one of his chosen servants talk like that against me? And they had a good point. There was huge dissonance. And I felt the same
Yeah.
way. And I had not I feel like I'd always been maybe a little nuanced in my thinking just
Mhm.
from experiences I'd had. But I was also like, I've been the president of every organization in the ward that a woman can hold, and Stake Young Women's president, Stake
Mhm.
Young Women's counselor. Like I've had mostly leadership positions in the church in my adult life.
Yeah.
So I was, I was very faithful. But like I said, I had a little nuance here and there, right?
I honestly think that on some level, everybody has some kind of nuance. It's just really a matter of awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's our experiences that we go through. Those who experience, the death of a loved one or a child or illness, cancer, like you all did, or divorce, or all kinds of things. Those affect the way we view those beliefs and how we internalize them and try to make sense of them. Like Cece,
Yeah.
I don't believe God really loves me. Otherwise, why would so and so say XYZ? And that just breaks my heart
Yeah.
because I know that's not an isolated case.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot more common than it should be. And of course, that wasn't the only experience they had like that. Of course, there were kids, that did
Yeah.
things, and anyway, just didn't feel like they belonged there.
We all have boxes, political boxes, religious, intellectual, gender role, leadership, educational, or professional boxes, even spiritual. Boxes create the belief cages that inhibit our progress or impede our personal development. Boxes represent the stories we have about our lives. Sometimes they even bring up shame, and this is problematic because shame inhibits curiosity, compassion, inquisitiveness, understanding, questioning, expansion, and the cycle repeats. Join me for a midwinter pause. This is an opportunity to slow down long enough to hear the thoughts and beliefs in your mind. They may have served you or even protected you at one time, and now they are not just getting in the way, they may cause you harm and impede your growth. You will not regret gifting yourself this time. It's free. Link is in the show notes to register.
And that was hard because I love them with everything that I am. And also, I loved the church. I mean, I feel like I had had a lot of beautiful experiences. It brought a lot of, it was valuable in my life from the experiences I had because of opportunities afforded me through the organization, right? But trying to make those, like, right, you have in your mind these expectations of how things, and we are promised that if you do these things, it's like an equation, right? Do this and this equal this, right? And I
Well, you
believe that.
mentioned you mentioned you were from an Orthodox family. You mentioned you went on a mission. When you are all in that way, you make covenants, and so that is
Yes.
a two-way promise. So yeah.
Yeah. And I probably should mention too, my mission president was huge on obedience. And I think just looking back, I picked up from there going forward. I definitely suffered from scrupulosity for sure.
Can you explain how you understand scrupulosity to be? I think that's a really important concept that we should be talking about more.
Yeah. So scrupulosity is under the umbrella of obsessive compulsive disorder. It's called religious OCD.
Yeah.
Of course, just like any mental health issue, it affects people a little differently, right? Like some people feel like they have to go and confess over and over the same sin that they've had.
Right.
Mine was more, I have to do these things. Like I could not go a day without having my personal worship, reading my scriptures, praying, doing all those things. I started going to the temple once a week, just fasting once a week.
Yeah.
I think just over the top because, first of all, I need my son healed. Second of all, my daughter at the time, right? My daughter is trying to take herself out of this life and I need help, And so, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Tears are welcome. Here. Take the
So I
time.
felt like I really needed to be close with God because the answers I was given was just to love her, to accept her, that's exactly what our heavenly parents are doing. And yet I was being given a different message. I'm not saying that the church or its leaders were saying not to love people, but I felt like the message, and maybe this is my interpretation of it, but it felt to me like you can love them to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you love unconditionally, then that's considered condoning what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really difficult. So I really
Mm-hmm.
felt like through all these really difficult trials, like I have to be connected to God because
Mm-hmm.
a misstep with my child is life or death, you know? And I don't want to say that I never made a mistake because I did.
We all do.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned from them and I was able to apologize, to reframe, you know, and I've been able to go back and visit those things and tell them how I wish I would have responded if I could go back. And that's been really healing.
So, if I can interject something a little bit, I think this is such an important concept to understand because I believe it's hidden. It's not obvious to many what you're talking about, scrupulosity. I think it occurs so much more frequently than is realized. While you were talking, I thought of my own self in younger years, many moons ago. I remember there was a time, one of our beliefs, one of our practices was not to make purchases on Sunday to in an effort to keep the Sabbath day holy. And somehow that, I've learned that different families see different activities as okay, not okay. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is I remember feeling almost guilty if I purchased a soda out of a vending machine
No,
on
I
on a
was there too.
Sunday.
Same thing.
Or if I remember as a student, had a student job, if I took home a pen or some paper or some office supplies, either inadvertently or, oh, this is a great pen. Seriously, we're talking about a pen. I'm not
Yeah.
saying go steal something. I'm just saying it uses so much mental energy to stay in that loop of worrying. Is this okay? Is it not okay? What does this mean about me? What's going to happen? Does that mean I'm honest? Does that mean I'm true in all of my dealings? I mean, and it can go on and snowball and snowball. And so it actually makes sense, Marley, that when the stakes were even higher for you, you're talking your children one thing about having actual religious observances or practices, it gives one the idea that something that you do actually affects an outcome. Like it gives this almost false sense of control. And I'm not saying that people should or should not engage in those practices. That's not it at all, you know. So what I mean by that is I think it's a different level of trust to kind of transcend those practices, those physical, outwardly practices, and really and truly, it's kind of Zen, lean into what is, to allow yourself to be enveloped in the present, in what actually exists, knowing that there is minimal that you can actually control, but most of it is it's part of this existence. It's part of this life. It's part of the push and pull forces that kind of create this experience that we're living in. There would be no point of reference if we didn't have some of the harder stuff with the joyful and, celebratory stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
totally.
so where it becomes dangerous is, when a person then starts to take responsibility for, I'm doing all of these things. I'm going here. I'm paying this. I'm attending here. I'm check, 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 check. And still, this is happening. And then they're taking responsibility for things that maybe really aren't theirs to take responsibility for. Um, there are families who come from, who have queer individuals, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a child, whatever, they do lose them.
Yeah.
And there are deep feelings of sorrow that accompany that, as it should. Um, anyway, I didn't mean to get stuck on that, but it's just, I guess, if you see your loved ones observing their faith in a different way than what you have become comfortable to, than what you are used to, or that what you were taught. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Really. And like you said, Marley, the answers you kept getting were to just love. Um, how,
Yeah. So it really was. I don't think the biggest, there were definitely things at that time, thoughts I had, ideas, feelings that I would push aside, right?
Mhm,
Because I was still in a pretty orthodox place. And so I feel like I was on that path of a faith journey, but
mhm.
not really moving forward on it at that time. That came a
Okay.
little bit later.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's shift then. Let's go more towards there. I have found that, at least for me, asking questions, allowing doubts has actually refined and enriched my journey and enriched my faith and refined my faith. So I would love to hear from you. Like, how has asking questions, allowing doubts, how has that helped you in your faith journey, in your discipleship, and ultimately your relationship with the divine? Like, what changes have you seen? How has it helped you?
Well, I read a book a couple of years ago called The Sin of Certainty. And I don't, yeah, you're familiar with that book. And
Yes, I am. Very good one by Pete
he was
Enns.
very, yeah, he was very good at articulating kind of
Mm,
what I had been feeling along this journey that I had had, that I was having and still am having. And one of the things that he said really impacted me, and that was certainty. The cert, the antithesis of faith is not doubt. The
mhm,
antithesis of faith is certainty.
mhm.
And if you are certain about everything, if you know everything, then you're not open to hearing the things that God would teach you. And I won't say that across the board, like maybe in certain areas or something like that. But if you are very certain, you tend to be closed off,
Right. You're
which
less
is,
teachable.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is what I was, right? I was closed off. And I tell people now that my kids broke my heart wide open. And that made space for God, our heavenly parents, to teach
Hmm.
me, to help me to learn and transform. Like that's the thing that I have learned. One of the things I have learned is that the checkbox gospel living
Yeah.
has a place and it does not have the power to transform.
Right.
Living a life of faith, which is what we're told in the scriptures that we need to live a life of faith, that's a journey, that's uncertainty, right? Faith is not
Right.
knowing, it's uncertainty.
That's a really fantastic point. The check boxes doesn't really have the power to transform. It takes a whole lot more spiritual, mental, and emotional energy and stretching of your faith to think outside of
Yeah.
those boxes and define your journey for yourself. That means learning how to connect to that inner voice,
Mm-hmm.
your inner wisdom, and truly cultivate that relationship by listening to it and following through with it, even if and when it does whisper things that are in contradiction to what you had been taught. That's where this significant cognitive dissonance just can become unbearable. It
Yeah.
did for me at one point. It's not anymore.
Yes. Yeah. Me as well. Um,
Yeah, that's really, really good.
yeah. And this was about 2 years ago, to what you said about trusting your internal authority.
Yeah.
I have a practice of prayer journaling, what I call prayer journaling, where, I meditate. I
Hmm.
feel like, when I'm connected, then I just write out what I want to say to God at that time. And I just wait and write down the impressions that I have.
I love it.
And I've learned so many things, but understandably, at times, I'll just think to myself and I'll even write it down and ask, like, how do I know this isn't just me giving myself these answers? Now, I do have to say that there have been multiple times when I am writing and I'm just like, whoa, that is not me. I don't know where that, I know where that
Mhm.
came from, but I could not have come up with that. But the answer I got to that, and a lot of times it's impressions, or it's God speaks to me in metaphor and in
And simile
analogies.
analogies. Okay.
But at this time, what I saw was this little seed in me, and recognized that as my divinity, and that God was not outside of me, that God was in me and I was in God, that I can trust those things that come from me. It kind of reminded me of, Harry Potter, the last movie, and it's in the book too, when Harry, sees Dumbledore on the other side and says, how do I know that I'm not just creating this in my mind?
Yeah, I remember that scene.
Yeah. And he says, why does it matter? Like, it's a reality to you. And being given that answer has made me trust so much more the things that come from my heart, the things that I feel like are inspiration, or, I trust myself a lot more.
Wow, I have had a similar experience where I was trying to figure that out for myself too, trying to figure out, is this a thought? This was particularly when I was going through life coach training, because we're taught the model: circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result, right? You're nodding your head. You must know that.
Yes, I
And
do.
I kind of got stuck on the thought line for a little while, trying to figure out what's a thought sometimes when I am in contemplation or in writing mode or whatever, versus what comes from the spirit. And I received a message very similar to what yours. It doesn't matter. I mean, it could be one or the other, but what's important is what you do with it and what you create and how it moves you forward,
Yeah.
and the relationship that it's cultivating. I love your seed analogy. That's the most beautiful analogy. I too, Marley, have come to that a very similar conclusion that the divinity is already there. It's within us.
Yes.
That means God is within us. That
Yes.
divineness.
Yes. Yes.
I've never said that out loud. That's so beautiful. I'm looking at the time. I've kept you. I'll
Oh
move
no,
along.
it's fine. One thing to that I want to say is that seed grows and fills us to the extent that we allow ourselves
Mhm.
to live more into our higher self, right? That seed grows.
Yeah.
And of course we're always going to have, what is called the ego, right? The lower
Hmm.
self.
Hmm.
We'll always have that kind of sabotages us. I feel like I don't live in my true self most of the time, my higher
I
self,
think
right?
that's human. I think that's human. It's a process. Yeah, it's ongoing.
But recognizing that that's there, that it's not something to achieve, right? It's something to allow because it's
Hmm.
already there. It's like, well, this is another analogy. You've heard of people finding an old painting in an attic of a house they built, and it needs to be cleaned. So they take it to be cleaned. And as the restorer is cleaning it, they notice that there's something underneath. And so they start removing what's been painted over to reveal a priceless masterpiece.
Hmm.
And that's how I feel like that part of ourself that is fine and good, that tries to protect us, right, and keep us safe, that, some people call the false self, sometimes or masks the true
Yes.
masterpiece that is our
Right.
true self.
Right.
And the process is not achieving, making that person. It's just allowing it to be revealed, our higher self to be revealed.
Right. I caught what you said in the very beginning of our conversation, how you're kind of a deep thinker. You really connect deeply. And I think that's what allows folks to really be able to do that, is when you're able to take that mask off. And the way that most do it is if they feel safe to do it. And that's one thing that it's pretty tricky in this journey, opening up what's going on for you with those around you, in your family, in your civic communities, in your church and faith communities. Can you speak to that a little bit? How you approach trying to foster that open communication, or maybe in some cases it's, that's what healthy boundaries are for. Only you can know who and when and where and how much, right? But just if you can just share a little bit about that part.
So there are definitely people close to me with whom I share
Mm-hmm.
some of my thoughts and feelings and how some of my beliefs have changed and evolved and how I'm growing. There are other places that, in my faith community, like my local ward, we haven't lived here for very long, so I don't really have any social capital. So I don't really feel safe to share
Oh,
everything. Like I
got
do
it. Totally
try,
understand.
I try to give my perspective and try to expand.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I feel like people don't want what I have to offer. And so that it feels isolating I
Yeah.
want to feel like I belong rather
Yeah.
than just trying to fit in.
Right. You can definitely tell when energy matches and when it's off and when it's not the right time to share
Yeah.
something with someone else, no matter who it might be. But I do commend you for taking those first steps. And because I truly believe safe spaces don't just happen, right? You have to create them. And that means somebody stepping forward, being the brave one first, and starting with a brave space of sorts. And so you're stepping into that. And thank you so much. What would you like others to know if you could think of pain points, really, really tough pain points about this journey, this intersection of being a person of the LDS faith background, conservative faith background, and then your role as parent, and you're having this faith journey that's quite different? What would you share with others? What would you like them to know?
Well, it comes back to, I think, probably the most important thing if I were addressing, just a variety of people of faith, and especially in my own faith community.
Mm-hmm.
It's another experience I had of being shown, an analogy, a metaphor about in the Book of Mormon, Lehi's dream. And in that dream, he sees an iron rod, and the interpretation of that rod is that rod is the word of God. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
always the pictures depict this, and
Mm-hmm.
I always before saw it as this iron rod, and everybody was grabbing, and they were walking the same path.
Like a literal metal rod.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know it's figurative, right? But that's what I envisioned. And at this time when I was taught this, I thought what was taught to me, Kay, it's not what is the word of God, but who is the word. And the word is Christ. And we hold to Christ. And if we hold to Christ, we have our own unique and personal iron rod that can go with us anywhere we go. Our path is unique to us. Every living person who ever was, are, or will be has their own unique path because they started from a different different origin. Like even if we're born in the same family, we all start very uniquely. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses and the things that we need to develop in this life. And so of course our path is going to be different than even if we have a twin, our twins,
Yeah.
every single one's going to be different. And we can
That
still
is
hold
amazing.
on to the word.
I love that distinction. It's not what, but who. I'm going to think about that one for a while. That's just beautiful because then you go back to what you were saying about your experience of God showing you a seed that was within you that represented God's divinity within you. And so there's just something there to connecting with that inner wisdom and that inner knowing and trusting it, trusting ourselves. That's really beautiful. So, one thing I always like to ask to wrap up is, the name of my podcast is very purposeful, purposely dropped the A, hoping to shed that shame that traditionally has come with asking questions and having doubts and allowing them. So, my question to you is, what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
I appreciate you asking that. And I've pondered on that question. And of course, for most of my life, I've thought of the saying, what people say,
Mm-hmm.
I know this beyond the shadow of a doubt,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which to me means certainty.
Yeah.
And when you think of doubt, the shadow of doubt, right? The shadow is the place for scary things, right? The shadow is where the monsters are. So doubt is scary, right? Until you go on a journey and you walk into that shadow and it's illuminated. There is no monster. It's not there. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's just answers, growth, transformation, living into who you truly are, and love.
I ask every guest that question, and every answer is different. You have a way with words. That is beautiful, is not adequately describing how it sounds, how it feels, but that's amazing. Well said.
Doubt,
Well said, my
doubts are
friend.
doubts are blessings in disguise, I
They
feel
are.
like.
They
Yeah.
are. And I love you said you walk into the shadow. It's scary until you walk right into it. It's all this story we've created around it. That's really where the fear comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, such an amazing conversation, such a great chat. Thank you, Marley. I'm so deeply appreciative and so deeply touched. I'd like to throw out a few questions, just looking for one word, two-word answers to
Okay.
get to know you a little better.
Okay.
So tell us your favorite book
Oh boy.
or a favorite book. Doesn't have to be the one.
I'm not, I used to be a novel reader. I'm not much of a novel reader anymore. I really like books that are more deep. I love Terrell and Fiona Gibbons books.
Mhm,
So that's one of my favorite is I've read all of their books.
mhm.
The most recent one that they came out with, All Things
All
New,
things new. Yep, I
is
got that one.
probably my favorite of all of theirs. Yeah, any of those. Adam
Great choice.
Miller's Original Grace,
Yeah,
I've loved that. So yeah, I read more books like that, or
same, same.
yeah,
So would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I think I once said I was an ambivert, you know, but I
That is
think
a valid
I'm,
response. I need to start adding that to my selection.
yeah.
There's quite a few
So I
feel
don't know
that
if I'm
way.
an ambivert or if I am an introverted extrovert
Hmm.
or an extroverted introvert.
But
Did I say
you've
that
got
right?
some of all of it in there. You've got
Yeah,
this
so I
spectrum.
like being around small groups of people. Large groups are a little harder for me. And I also like being by myself. I recharge in both places, so I must be an ambivert.
And who is your favorite artist?
Well, of late, I, for myself, on my birthday, just a couple months ago, I went by myself to Gallery in Provo, the Compass Gallery,
Yes.
to spend time with the art show that was there by J. Kirk Richards.
Yeah.
And it was very moving,
Yes. I got to
very,
see
and
that.
yeah. And so right now, it's him.
I don't know why. I just had this feeling that J. Kirk Richards might come into this. That's one of my favorites as well. Beautiful work.
Yeah.
So, are you a night owl or a morning lark?
Used to be a night owl, and now I'm a morning lark.
Hmm. And who is your celebrity crush? Or if you have one, you don't have to have one. I've had a few
Um,
not.
well, at one time, during Pirates of the Caribbean, it was Johnny Depp, of course,
That's awesome.
as Captain
Do
Jack
you know what?
Sparrow.
We're from the same generation. I bet. Do you remember Johnny Depp from 21 Jump Street movie?
Yes,
Yes. Yeah, those were the days.
yes.
Okay. Do
So,
you,
but now I have to think about it. I don't, I haven't thought about that in a
no
long time.
worries. Okay. Do you do still or carbonated water or do you do diet soda?
I like still water, and on occasion, I'll have a soda.
Good for you. And finally, the furthest place that you have traveled.
Thailand is the furthest I've traveled.
Oh,
Yeah,
fun. I have yet to be there. That's great. It's on the bucket list. I have a lot on
it's
the bucket list.
great.
So
Thank you so much.
I wish I could reach out through the screens here and just give you a big hug. This has been so moving. And my life has been blessed by talking with you today. I know others will be as well. I appreciate so much you being willing to step into your higher self and your brave self, your courageous. By the way, nobody has courage before they actually step into it.
Right.
But
Thank you. It's really been a
yeah,
privilege. I feel like I've needed to share my story for some time, and I appreciate the opportunity that you've given me.
I can't wait for our listeners to get to hear it. Thank you again. Sending you love. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more, or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.